writer. I work for the studio Crows, where Thank you. I wrote a game about a tiger. Bad stuff happens in it to everybody. And today I'm going to talk about something very, very different to that. I'm going to talk to you today about fetch quests. Fetch quests are amazing. And by amazing, I mean they're actually the other one. They're terrible. They're amazing and they're terrible. Can a thing be both of these things at once? And the answer is yes. It can, and I will explain that to you today. Fetch quests have reached this really interesting point where they are so overplayed that the manner in which they've become overplayed is actually really interesting. Because they're everywhere, and because they're so similar, the ways in which they're different actually open really interesting avenues to let us talk about how these games are made and what sort of stories they choose to tell. And I know this sounds like I'm making this up about fetch quests, that fetch quests are interesting, because they're not that, they're the opposite of that. But I'm going to prove this to you. I will. It's true. Fetch quests are a sort of game design Rosetta Stone, and I feel weird. Actually, wait a second. Just so everybody's on the same page here, I should talk about fetch quests and on what they are. In large-scale open-world RPGs, usually, you're asked by somebody, let's say a werewolf, to bring them something, let's say some grapes. You're asked by the werewolf to bring the grapes, and then when the werewolf has received the grapes, I think that's just good. I think that's a good thing. So I feel weird comparing it to a Rosetta Stone, because the Rosetta Stone, translated 3 languages simultaneously and opened a door to history, to human history, and I'm talking about grapes, so that's not great. But these often really tiny pieces of filler content are kind of remarkable. And since I said that, we need to talk very briefly about filler content. I'm using inverted commas around it. In fact, I'm using inverted commas around every word here. Fetch quests tend to show up in these gigantic open worlds with 400 hours of gameplay. And the whole thing about making a world that is so gigantic you could get lost in it without trying is that you need to fill it with things. And that's something that game designers discovered, and they didn't really know what to do about that. So they just showed up with fetch quests and populated these worlds with them. Because players want lots of content. That's what players want. They want content. And when you ask them what sort of content they want, they're less sure about that, quite dramatically. Which is strange, because fetch quests, in a lot of ways, are about fundamentally engaging with the world, that is to say, through redistribution. They're about taking something, the grapes, from the vineyard and taking them over here to when somebody else gets them. They're about killing local wildlife. They're about impacting the world in a fairly sort of direct sense that involves numbers. But if you ask people what they want out of their 400 hours of games, they're pretty clear that it's not that. They don't want that. They want 400 hours of the right thing, or the main thing, or the thing which the game is about. And identifying that is actually really difficult. I want to be clear that, I'm not trying to discount the fact that fetch quests are really boring, because they are. I just sort of want to get past talking about them as boring and talking about them as serving other interesting purposes. So it's strange to me that people don't like fetch quests because they are not what the game is about. Because if you want to know what a game thinks it is, you should look at its fetch quests. I mean, not directly. Skyrim's developers know that their game isn't about grape fetching. I think it's about dragons. I believe it's about dragons. But I mean this in the sense that fetch quests are one of the primary ways in which video games are able to express their subconscious. Yes, absolutely. Oh my god. Yes, 100%. Games, like everything that has ever been made by anybody, are products of intentionality. People make decisions, and they put their decisions into the games. But a hell of a lot of this stuff doesn't actually show up in the game at all. It might never have showed up in the game. It might never have been verbally expressed between the developers. I'm talking about things from office conversations that were never written down, decisions that level designers made at 3 o'clock in the morning in the office, page 300 of the design document that we never saw at all, weird quirks in tools that means corridors have to be a certain height, things that don't snap together right. All of these things contribute together to the subconscious of a video game. And sometimes If you're lucky, they bubble up through the cracks in fetch quests. This is a popular video game. It was made in America and it's about Vikings. Bethesda worked out, and this is a very clever piece of reasoning, that a computer can make fetch quests. This is a masterstroke. When the game was released, they built a system which generates fetch quests seemingly infinitely. You can just keep going and fetching things. And you can do this in the real world too, I recommend. It's really good fun. And when the game was released, there was an outcry by people who looked at the Radiant quest system, which is what they called it, and they just went like, nah, shit, I don't like it. And when Bethesda sort of said, like, well, what did you expect from the Radiant quest system, a computer making quests? Players just kind of went like, warrior wants some more dragon stuff, I think. I think they just wanted like, well, I want to feel really amazing, be a Viking in the snow. I love that stuff. That's the good shit right there. Top quality content. Looking at what the Radiant Quest system does, though, reveals something really super fascinating. What's central to the Radiant Quest system is its ability to take players to locations that the game knows that they have not seen before. It will take players to something underneath a waterfall that they haven't seen before, or like a hole that goblins live in, but they haven't seen it before. And this is really interesting because it reveals that central to the way Skyrim thinks about itself is places. Skyrim is about exploration, which in the case of Bethesda, and I don't mean this pejoratively, means going to places. Bethesda games are about pushing players towards new places, and their Radiant Quest system does that 110%. Nobody in a Bethesda game cares about the sword that the man has asked you to fetch. They care about the place framed with waterfalls where you fetch it. Sometimes these quests lead to really boring dungeons. They do that a lot, really. But sometimes they lead to really interesting locations, like in the quest called The Man Who Cried Wolf. Sorry. We have to talk about this, and we have to talk about this right now, which is, when I was researching the Radiant Quest system, I saw for the first time a list of Skyrim's quests. And it was amazing seeing them all laid out there. Because every quest in Skyrim is named, and the names are the result, clearly, of attempting to populate a world with interestingly named quests, in which the people writing these names have not been communicating at all. And so Skyrim quest names tend to fall into two camps. Camp number one, the fancy camp. These feature names like a few words with you, loud and clear. I don't know what this one means. I think it's talking about winter. I like this one, because this is about a place. I assume it's about a place. The other camp is my favorite, and these are the direct people. This next one's fantastic, because as I understand it, the second word here is usually referred to the thing you're robbing, which apparently is a heist in this case. This is my second favorite alternate title for Skyrim. And this is my first favorite alternate title for Skyrim. This is just the game! You just do that! Anyway, Man Who Cried Wolf leads to this tiny cave that opens up into a gigantic underground castle, and the quest reveals itself to be something very different than what it originally set out to be, which, interestingly, is what this game does all the time. After spending a while with The Witcher 3, it becomes clear that it has fallen into a rhythm, and the rhythm is taking fairly traditional quest structures, quest ideas, and then getting about 3/4 of the way through, and then M. Night Shyamalan, the heck of it. What a twist! The goodie was a baddie. The man was a werewolf. The family situation was actually deeply sad. And what's interesting about this is it works, and it reveals that, in contrast to Skyrim's obsession with places, The Witcher is obsessed with attempting to, and frequently succeeding in, depicting people. And this requires a lot from a video game. Like what Alice was talking about, it requires really good casting. It requires really good voice acting and really good voice acting direction. Care has been taken to ensure that these punchlines land. Skyrim is a story about big open worlds and the places in them. And The Witcher is a game about big open worlds and the people in them. These games' fetch quests reveal this. And now, I'm going to talk about Destiny. Destiny's fetch quests are utterly ephemeral. If you think you've seen ephemeral fetch quests before, play Destiny. They are received from sticks in the ground. Other games have tried to decentralize the people giving you the fetch quests. Destiny is the first game that decentralizes the thing you're actually fetching. Frequently, I will forget what it was. It might have been some wire. I think it might have been some wire. I'll get halfway through a fetch quest and I'm not sure what it's about. And this reveals, perhaps more than anything else in the game, that Destiny is just a seething mass of numbers. It's just a sort of like a writhing snakes of numbers with this weird shell of a story hanging over it. Destiny is 3 kids in a trench coat pretending to be a competent video game. I'm not actually sure why you do the fetch quests in Destiny. I don't really know why you do them. I'm playing a lot of Destiny. Destiny cares about numbers. It cares about making the numbers go up. It cares about sometimes making them go down. It cares about giving you guns that do more damage and guns that do less damage. And I think that looking at these 3 games together reveals that more than anything else, we get the fetch quests that we deserve as designers. We care about our world. We will perhaps even subconsciously build fetch quest systems that emphasize places to go. We care about our characters. Our fetch quests will reflect that. I don't really know what Destiny cares about. It might be maths. It's probably maths. It might be texture. Thank you so much for listening.